Macmillan Audio presents The Inflamed Mind by Edward Bullmore, narrated for you by Sean Patrick Hopkins. Please refer to the accompanying supplemental PDF for more detailed information regarding key scientific terms used throughout this audiobook. To my family.
Preface. One of the things that first attracted me to psychiatry many years ago was that it tries to deal with the most personal human afflictions, clinical disturbances of ourselves, our emotional balances and imbalances, our states of mind and memories, our ideas about the world and its relationship to us. As a young doctor, the richly individual content of mental health symptoms seemed much more interesting to me than physical health symptoms like ankle swelling or skin itching. It was also attractive to me from a scientific perspective that all these mental symptoms must originate from the brain, but it was not yet known how. It seemed likely to me then, and it still does today, that if we could understand more about how mental health disorders are generated by brain mechanisms, we would be in a much stronger position to do something about treatment and prevention. We would probably also feel less ashamed or afraid to talk about mental health issues if we knew more certainly where they came from, or what caused them. So when I was about 30, finding out more about how mental symptoms originated from the brain became a professional research mission for me. At this time, around 1990, many psychiatrists were focused on how brain chemicals like dopamine and serotonin could cause disorders like psychosis and depression. But it was clear there was an enormous amount more still to understand. I realized that I would need to become a scientist as well as a clinical psychiatrist. For several years in the 1990s, I was supported by the Wellcome Trust to do a PhD, supervised by Professor Michael Brammer at the Institute of Psychiatry in London. The first functional magnetic resonance imaging scanners were just starting up in a few places around the world, and I got involved in mathematical analysis of these newfangled fMRI data to make maps of human brain function in healthy people and patients with mental health disorders. I started writing and co-writing many scientific papers on neuroimaging, neuroscience, and mental health. This was a very exciting transition for me. I was lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time to catch the first wave of fMRI research, which has since expanded massively into a global science ecosystem. I thought it could only be a matter of time, perhaps a few years, certainly by the time I was 50, before the irresistible flood of new discoveries from brain scanning and brain science generally must force radical improvements in how we think about and treat mental health disorders. It was in that spirit that I started as a professor of psychiatry in the University of Cambridge in 1999. At first, I carried on with my brain imaging research, trying to find new ways of measuring and analyzing the complex network organization of the human brain. I am probably most well known as an academic scientist for my work on network neuroscience, or the connectome. But that is not the topic of this book. As I approached my mid-40s, I couldn't help noticing that despite what seemed like a tremendous amount of progress in neuroscience internationally, there was no sign yet of any great change in what was happening day to day in local NHS clinics and hospitals. I became restless about the prospect of making any difference to psychiatric practice simply by writing more papers about brain scans. I recognized that the most powerful lever of change in the history of medicine was always the advent of a new treatment. I found myself wanting to know more about how new drug treatments were being discovered for depression, psychosis, and other disorders. That's why, in 2005, I took an unusual chance to start working half-time for GlaxoSmithKline, also known as GSK, one of the UK's biggest pharmaceutical companies. Half the week I spent working in my university lab on the fascinating esoterica of network analysis, and the other half I spent working as the director of GSK's clinical research unit, conveniently located about 200 yards down the hall in Addenbrooke's Hospital.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?